governance, and people need a fair go.
Well done. Excellent.
Te urara Flavel.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Kia ora tātai. Mr. Speaker, Mr. O'Rourke talked about a lot of suffering. I think this morning, listening to 3 bills that came through the House of this, came to this House, would pretty much follow the same theme. We've been fortunate or unfortunate today to have traversed a lot of history for the people of Tūhoe, Ngāti Hauā, Ngāti Koroki, Kahukura, and of course the descendants of Mokomoko. And their legacies are relived, their experiences arrived here in Parliament today. And it's in the spirit of that sort of sorrow that I wanted to focus this contribution on this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, and that is on our tamariki and on our mokopuna, and indeed the mokopuna of Tūhoe. Mr. Speaker, in this morning's paper under the heading, quote, child abuse is rising in New Zealand, Children's Commissioner Russell Willis revealed that the public tolerance for violence against children still had a way to go. I've got to ask the question, how can we as a nation hold our heads high when our child abuse statistics are such an indictment on our reputation? Our focus as members of Parliament should rightly and properly be on what we are doing as agents of the state. And as such, I would implore all members of this House to the statement released just 3 days ago on Marae Investigate, made by a leading paediatric specialist, Professor Ines Asher. I referred to that in the speech this morning. So Professor Asher, a clinician at the Starship Hospital, a paediatrician for over 30 years and the head of the paediatrics department at Auckland University, has spent her life investing in the well-being of children. So when she described the treatment of children during the Tūhoe raids 6 years ago as, quote, one of the worst cases of child abuse by the state in recent years, one would think that this House would listen to. Of course, it's not the first time that the children of Ruatoki have been raised in public attention. A mere 5 months ago, a report from the Independent Police Conduct Authority recommended that changes to policy and practice needed to be introduced, which would reflect better planning for children and vulnerable people. Aside from that, Mr. Speaker, I'm still waiting for the Human Rights Commission report to come out, and hopefully that will be soon. So at the time of this recent release, the local school teacher, Gayleen Collier, reflected that her pupils had already been frightened when they were detained in their homes during the operation. Her conclusions, sir, were pretty clear, and I quote, "It was tough on the families and it should never ever have happened." Mr. Speaker, I've relentlessly brought the issues of these families to this House, but we are still a far way away from seeing any resolution to the lasting trauma that Professor Asher speaks of. On public television on Sunday, she told New Zealand, quote, "If these children had been held by armed offenders in the same way that the state would have immediately rescued these children and given them some help and assistance. And the children would have been on the front page of the papers and on your lead news items," end of quote. So why is it that we cannot face up to the wrongs done to the innocent children caught up in Operation 8? Why are we so reluctant to admit that the events of that day represent, as Professor Asher states, the most profound abuse of power in our memory? Mr. Speaker, in a letter written to former Police Commissioner Howard Broad, Queen's Counsel Peter Williams described the extent of the terror raids as this: "There have been a great show of force by the police, who have been accompanied by military-type vehicles, helicopters, firearms, dogs and various other adjuncts. Most of these police officers were dressed in military battle uniform, consisting of black clothing, balaclavas, and carrying what appears to be loaded weapons, in particular rifles and revolvers," end of quote. So one of the interviewees said he counted 43 police officers surrounding the house where he lived with his partner, his 4 young children, and his father's partner, and the father. And all of these police had guns trained on this house. These prisoners, mainly women and children, were kept under armed guard and detained for varying periods between 3 and 6 hours. So the children particularly were terrified, he said. Now, so I don't understand how we can receive that sort of information, how we can hear the horrific experiences our state forced upon children and not feel motivated to change or to act. So We could go to Ruatoki Valley, we could sit with the people of Tūhoe, we could share with the whānau our acknowledgement of what happened on the 15th of October 2007, and that they had a truly traumatic effects on the children that would affect them for the rest of their lives. Sir, our job as Parliament is to represent the best interests of our people. This is beyond party politics, it's beyond bureaucracies, this is about our children.
Darian Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I would have thought